This is the Police Training HQ podcast. We are your headquarters for all things training and resources for Texas law enforcement. Welcome back to the Police Training HQ podcast, your headquarters for training and resources for Texas law enforcement. We're back for episode 9. We're going to talk today about instructor comfort versus competence. It's going to be sort of a tag along to our episode 7 discussion. We hope everybody enjoyed our update episode, a short one. But Mike, how are you? Let's talk to him about our new podcast setup.
Oh, I'm doing well. We're starting to use Riverside to record podcasts. So this is the first one, I guess, we've done where we're in 2 separate locations. I'm on the farm and you're at home in lovely Granbury. I assume it's lovely. I haven't been there in a while, but and the goal with this too is we're gonna, as we mentioned in that last episode, potentially start doing some video recording. So as long as we don't damage people's eyeballs having to look at our smiling faces, but I'm excited to see how this one comes out, being again in 2 different locations. So back to you.
Well, I mean, certainly miss it. We're going to miss each other, but this will also open up. Well, first, let me say thank you for your leadership and your guidance on getting us into this direction, because I think we're just going to be keeping up with the Joneses at this point and trying to match, not competitors, but just trying to match what people I think want to see, which is they want to see live feed. They want to see who's talking and, the face behind the voice. Despite some of our commenters that we have the base for a radio, or at least I do. So thank you for that. And this will also allow us, was this kind of in this update episode, this will allow us to start adding guests from afar as well.
Yeah, with a camera and a microphone, we can add in a bunch of folks. Not that we want a bunch of folks, but I think we're pretty well wide open to add folks in to join the conversation with us. Yeah, that would be
That's awesome.
That'd be really exciting.
Yeah, this is really great, and for the listeners, potential viewers in the future, yeah, this is a really cool setup. It's easy. I do get to be at home. And that's going to help us too, I think, maybe have a little bit more time to engage our audience as well. We won't be as limited to that. And certainly we'll open up those discussion channels a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big plus. More episodes too. We don't have to try to plan around when our paths cross at the same location. So, I think we're going to see some benefit in several directions.
That's great. And I guess as a new addition, so since we're not so limited, letting everybody know that you and I have a couple, I guess as an update to our update, if I'm allowed to be so bold. We have a basic instructor class starting Monday, and looking forward to kind of updating after that. And then we have one coming up pretty soon at the location. So asking everybody to kind of stay tuned with us on that. And we're going to ramp up our CE trainings coming up pretty soon as well.
Yeah, well, you're going to be teaching in Cleburne, I think.
Yeah, you threw the Wolves.
Basic instructor. Yes, I did. Threw you to the Wolves.
No,
I'm sure you'll survive the wolf pack attack.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss you.
Yeah, you say that, but
I
don't know. Sometimes I wonder.
That's right. No, you can bet on that. So today, I was in kind of deep thought about our episode 7, and the steps that we uncovered. Part of that maybe was discussing what an instructor's role is and should be. I don't think it's nuanced or in any way anecdotal to suggest that to start to dig down and to diagnose some of the issues that you and I are trying to bring to the forefront. I don't think it's unpopular to say there's some comfort versus competence discussions to have. Would you agree?
I fully agree with that. Comfort seems to be the norm, and it's not necessarily wrong to seek comfort. I think that's fairly human-like to do that. But when you seek comfort, I think you miss a whole lot of the experience, or you compromise the experience on the part of a student. If we're talking about that from an instructor standpoint, standing and reading off of a screen, I think certainly it's comfort. I mean, it's there. I don't have to really recall actively my subject that I'm teaching. It's going to be on the next slide, and then on the next slide, and on the next slide. And I mean, I think that's, and we've talked about this a lot, that seems to be the norm. Let's take the comfortable way to deliver the class material, but not thinking about the end result of that, or the lack of an end result. Do they walk out of a classroom probably knowing little more than they did, if any more than they did when we started the day?
Yeah, and also you've mentioned this several times, the kind of getting over yourself, quote unquote, and your ego shouldn't be the guide. It's a selfless act, as we discussed in other episodes. And you know that we had an experience recently. I'd like to share with you, if that's okay. And of course, I won't say names. You know, I'm the king of wanting to be cryptic. But it was interesting. So, you know, when that kind of weird feeling when somebody says something that it sort of sounds polite, but you know it's not. Or maybe it's a backhanded compliment or sort of a sideways compliment. I think my nephew would call that hashtag kidding, not kidding. Have you had something like that before?
You're going to make me learn a new language if you start talking like that.
Yeah.
Do
Well,
they have that Duolingo app for that so I can learn
millennial
speak or whatever?
Yeah.
Millennial X, I don't know what it is, but.
Well, I have to say, you know, we've at a particular location too, we got some, especially our modalities and the discussion we have about multimodal approach, specifically getting these students to the retention or plugging our episode 7 past that third step. As you and I said, we talk a lot about our core principles, autonomy, relevance, and practical application, and everything that's wrapped up into that. And although you and I will eventually dissect those to its very core, that the compliment that I experienced was, you know, it sounds nice in theory, but I'm not sure how much weight that holds in the classroom.
That was what they were saying to you?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not hurt by it because I understand it. I understand as a pattern seeking mammal, which is something I want to talk about later, something I read. But we know that students retain more when they engage more and they apply more. So why are some instructors, and I'm sort of taking my cue from the compliment, you know, from this, why are some instructors just so quick to dismiss perhaps some things that we're doing without even trying it?
Fear of change. I think that's a common theme. Well, and you hear that even in leadership books about law enforcement. Cops are slow to change or resist change. I think that's a given for a lot of people, maybe most people, because we do seek that point of comfort, and to have to change, have to do something different, have to put yourself out there a little bit, experiment with things. Because when you experiment with things, it may not work. And if you're not willing to take a few risks for what might end up being the perfect solution, I think you'll stick with what you know. And your status quo, I guess, is perfectly in line with comfort. And it stifles change. I would argue stifles it a lot.
And even if you've done it once or twice, it always feels like whatever control you had may have been false control or whatever. Like the control that you've talked about, this perceived role. I'm going to break it down for a comparison's sake, if you'll walk that path with me. But like anything else, it's got to start at. I think the reason that our model and our teaching model works well is because we have effectively changed the way that students arrive to class. Am I so far off with that?
No, I think that what you're having them do before they come to class is the foundation for learning the material and hanging on to the material, not just at the end of that evening, but the end of that week and throughout the academy, and then hopefully into the career. Because pre-work, so to speak, you come in better equipped. I taught last week, and I see people flipping through trying to figure out what's the topic that we're covering today, because they weren't told, hey, you need to do a little prep work, read the material, because then you're playing catch up. As a student, you're playing catch up the whole time. That what did he say, and what's on the board, and or what's on the screen, as opposed to being able to engage. The autonomy piece, I think, is linked directly to that. It's like, we want you to be able to get into that practical application piece, but all that gets slowed to a crawl when the student is not prepared. And as instructors, we're not requiring that they come to. And for the listener, it's a worksheet as far as from our flow. They're exploring the material, looking at the material, answering questions about it, and come into class ready to go to work. I think that's the first step to make it through our process or follow the model. And I think, and if you would, because I think you do a really good job at explaining. We keep saying the model, our model, and it's not to be cryptic, right? But it's what is it that we're doing in the classroom and before the classroom and after they leave the classroom that is we're seeing better outcomes.
Yeah, well, it does start with the workbook that you and I discussed sort of at the beginning. Is like, well, actually, let me take a step back because that's not quite true. I had a severe neurodivergent moment, I'm going to call it, and I guess it was frustrating when he came to you and said, how can I tap into students' motivation? How can I get to that real deep intrinsic motivation to want to go to class? And it doesn't have to be the academy. It can be continuing ed or otherwise. Because I think you and I both are the type of people that enjoy the process of going to a training regardless. And so I see it a lot of the times. And one of the discussions that you and I had was, well, we started at cognitive load, which means there's just so damn much material. And eventually that cognitive load of having to parse out stuff that I'm just now being introduced to for, let's say, cadets to start, that will eventually trump your motivation or even the reason you got up that morning. That's not in any particularized way, but that's what we sort of came to theoretically. On the CE side of it, it might be even worse because you come to class and you're getting belted with information. And I'm supposed to be an officer that has experience, and yet here I am taking in the lot. And that's a long explanation for how this started. But to our model, yeah, you come to class and a workbook. It's not it. I think it was accidentally done in the past, maybe not as intentionally done, but the workbook probably was at some point busy work or work product. The way that you and I see it is an engagement tool that gives the students free class exposure to otherwise difficult or complicated material. And When the student starts early, it begins this neural encoding. Would you agree with me that that's sort of synonymous with familiarity of some kind?
Yeah, I think it's directly related to, I know we always drift to brain science, and some people are probably going to go, here they go again. But
You're damn right.
it's the attention getting piece. The brain is sort of constantly in a filter mode. Do I need this? Do I not need this? Do I need this? Do I not need this? And it's forcing focus. It's like, I've got to read this material. I've got to answer these questions. It's leading the brain down the path to, hey, maybe this doesn't get to set or doesn't need to set in my short-term memory. I think this is probably going to be important. And again, the brain it's a crazy magical thing, but it doesn't want to hang on to everything. If it doesn't think it's important, it's just not going to hang on to it. And you could sit there and pound the podium and click the PowerPoint slide and make it flash. If they're not paying attention, if they're not engaging, then that information is probably not going to end up sort of locked down in their brain somewhere. So I think the workbooks, from a brain science point of view, that's kind of where it starts.
Yeah. And yeah, it does start there. We'll get probably in our next episode, I'm certain, we'll get to some of the ways that we force attention into priority, how they prioritize information, which I think it's like even a better version of what you're saying. I think it's intentional focus, as my Dr. Huberman would say, intentional focus. But with that, plus now we're going to make you prioritize it faster. It opens the door to save time when you start to build this encoding and familiarity. And I may not have it in long-term memory, certainly, but I have it in working memory, certainly. And then I can start to build practical application, which in fact saves time in the classroom. That's part of the focus here is how comfort versus competence. How do we as instructors use our time? And in our model, our time is dedicated to our core principles, but they have to be ready to reciprocate what might be a ill-perceived notion of what an instructor's role is. Like, I'm supposed to talk as the instructor. I'm supposed to talk the whole time. Why can't someone like our student mind map on the board, for instance? We've done this before. And the benefit of that is they know it, the information, they played with it at home a second time or a third time by class time, and now they're prioritizing it. So it starts there. And then it's not like we're just running trivia night at a bingo hall. It's not, we're not just putting quizzes up on the board. We start to build skills then with moments in class that are designed to make them teach it back or run scenarios. But it all starts with some type of workbook and pre-work. It all comes together in class when you as a director pay someone like me, an instructor, to go into the classroom and explain nuance and difficult topics. Make sure that they understand those things. And then why can't I hand that back to them? And then at the end of the night, something like a tabletop or some type of scenarios, and you can't effectively do that every night. It's not random, which is why I took somewhat offense in all truth to that compliment, because it's not layered or random. It's not random, it's layered. It's a layered process that you and I have thought real hard about. And I know you said, well, hey, I don't want to get into brain science, but you and I have been teasing a little bit of brain science. And I know that some of what you have talked about before lines up with like this dopamine release, that perhaps if you want to discuss that somewhat, like when we preview something or we preview and then I know it as a student, I get a dopamine release, don't I?
Yeah, well, the preview followed by being able to explain it back in the classroom when an instructor asks, mind mapping it, like you said, being able to apply it in a scenario. the reward system, I guess, linked to dopamine. We like to be right. We like to be correct. If we don't get the answer correct, then for some people, the reward might be the struggle that, hey, I'm not going to miss this again. They're going to put that effort and energy into it, and that in and of itself is going to be a reward. And so I think that comes in different ways to different people. You know, what you might find exciting, interesting, pleasurable, and make you feel good when you accomplish it certainly may not match the things that do that for me or other people. And I don't necessarily know that we're even designing for that. It just happens almost organically with the process. And one other thing I wanted to ask, because you do a lot of teaching with our folks, and I've heard you talk about this before. When they come in ready to go, can we get them to the practical application more quickly? And I'm saying more quickly and not actually compromising anything. You just get to start using it a lot faster. So, I mean, do you see that happen? I would assume so.
Yes, and I also, which is why I mentioned instructor role earlier, I think that's what you pay me to do, actually.
I pay you?
Well, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. That's what you have me come in for, at least. You have me come in and make sure that the students can perform well later. Now, maybe for another day, but you and I both believe that later is not the state test.
Oh,
You and I
no.
believe that later is not the Friday at 3:30 on a continuing ed class. We don't believe that. We believe that the later is when in the field they see one of our 1403 A1 through 6 moments and they go, holy crap, I remember a story. So the answer to your question is yes. We'll definitely trickle down that path many times and diagnose it or dissect it rather, excuse me. But the answer is yes.
So, kind of going back to the theme that we started with, is this, I don't know that it's necessarily uncomfortable for the student, especially once they sort of get used to the model. I think, and this is some of concerns that you and I have expressed, is when we bring instructors into our program and our process, it's pretty foreign to them. Like, students are showing up with worksheets done and able to discuss the material. And if you go default back to your PowerPoint presentation and that's all you have, then that is the comfort coming out. And I don't say it's a huge learning curve. It's just use your preparation, your expertise to help them get to the relevance, some of which they'll probably come in with already from the workbooks, but certainly the practical application, applying the material in every topic area, all of them. I mean, there's not a single topic area that we don't have practical application in. And that competence that we want to see in instructors will override the desire to stick to what's comfortable to you. And I talked past what I really wanted to ask you.
No, that's great.
You've mentioned before, like, we have all these learning objectives for these topic areas, and I think there's a lot of folks that believe that they have to be taught in a very specific way, in a very specific order. They just have to be taught. But none of the TCOL instructor resource material scripts that out specifically, like how you teach every single topic area. But I think most often what happens is we turn it into a PowerPoint, we click through slides, and we're literally reading verbatim what the students have a copy of in their own instructor resource guide printout. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, I agree. And if this was a wedding and, you have to pick bride or groom side or whatever, we've been talking about incompetence or competence rather, but now we're going to go more towards comfort, I think, because it might today, unfortunately, be a advanced truth that you and I can recognize that learning objectives don't have to be taught in a static way at all. Not at all. It's not required. I think that I mentioned to you my probably silly and hopefully relevant analogy between learning objectives and sovereign citizens.
No.
Well,
I
for those of you
wanted to
that
hear
know,
this
Mike,
one, though.
yeah. Well, for those of you that know, Mike and I are Fourth Amendment guys, and I was asked a question one time about their right to travel and all that crap, which I'm not going to go into, but I see learning objectives as like a right to travel. When an instructor or a director or whomever tells me that you have to teach it, it's almost as if that learning objective has a right to travel one way. But just like the stupid argument, in my view, it doesn't say by what mode. In 1789, a learning objective's right to travel wasn't a 1993 like Mitsubishi Mighty Max. That would have been silly, you know. And so there's no mode that's required, or as you said, scripted by any means. And in that analogy, I think maybe it goes back. Maybe now I'm venturing over to more of the competent side, but you nailed it with preparation. You nailed it with, if I can spend time discussing what may be uncomfortable to the other side of it, is how can I bring in as an instructor, how can I bring in other modalities and reach students that would otherwise, the other side of this is an or ineffective way of teaching. And so if you have, let's take a long topic, like a 40-hour topic that has hundreds, perhaps, learning objectives. If I told you that I could discuss each one of those learning objectives in a rigid PowerPoint, and that maybe I scripted breaks well and I was funny, or I showed a video, somebody getting tased or whatever after class, and it's funny and everybody laughs. And so I have a moderate engagement level versus I walk in, you're ready to go, and we can knock out 40 learning objectives because their experience and my experience sort of combine to make a true adult learning environment. And so we're teaching each other. I'm explaining nuances, but nothing's missed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking as you're saying this, for our listeners, could you give a topic example? Even something maybe that we've done within the class recently, that from the workbook to what you're doing with them in the classroom to what they're doing at the end of the instruction, maybe not the end, but what I mean is what's the outcomes that you're seeing?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. One of the classes in our BPOC, everybody's BPOC, is force options. And as you know, we typically have Roger Turner. He does it really well, and you've done it. And so as I looked at it, I sort of feared that I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to match what he does because it's so well done. And so I just dipped into this model. Now, the first cool outcome I think was pretty obvious was that maybe the students hadn't caught on that a lot of what force options is Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. It's search and seizure and the different methodologies by which we can search and seize, someone, including Chapter 9 of the Texas Penal Code, which you and I both know is the up to deadly force. And so that was the first thing. That was my job as the instructor. But they've come in, they've met all those definitions up front. What force is, strength comes to bear, and all these different things. Then I can say things like, guys, this is actually like a Fourth Amendment topic. So tell me what you remember from Fourth Amendment class, the arrest, search, and seizure class. And we start to compare and contrast. Well, by the end of the first night, we just run 5 core scenarios in our academy and then have them stop and think. All the stuff that you've become familiar with at home, all the nuanced discussion in class, the things that you taught back. What are you performing right now? And then those light bulbs start to hit. Oh, I had to take somebody and separate them from a knife in a scenario where they were threatening somebody. And I'll go, wait, what does that sound like? And they're like, for instance, 904 of the Texas Penal Code, threat of force is justified when the use of force would have been justified. And I don't know that without that experience that we could have, I'm talking about time, would have had that concreted or myelinated for us nerds, that connection. I don't think you do it as fast.
So it's taking I think about early on in the academy, a lot of academies, it's taught very linear. And when you do that, I think you sort of leave out the connections back to the other topics.
Yeah.
Because that ties back to relevance. And because I wasn't sure where you were going with that, but when you started talking about the Fourth Amendment and, force, as far as the reasonableness under the Fourth Amendment.
Absolutely.
And so it's taking existing information, and now instead of just kind of tracking step by step, topic by topic, they're starting to be able to apply that in scenarios. And as you said, the 5 core scenarios, they're just using a new little piece of information,
Yep.
marrying it to their existing information from previous topics and applying it in real time. Yeah.
Yeah. And on that, I actually wrote another episode for the importance of not dumbing down, but centralizing scenarios to be familiar and the brain science behind why that's effective. But that's the model that you and I have adopted in our own academy, because I can change any concept I want to. And by the way, we've mentioned concept before, but just for the listener's benefit, concept and learning objective is the same thing here. We take a learning objective and we just mold it into a concept. And maybe 5 or 6 of those learning objectives come together for one concept. And I promise you, I won't go into testing because you know that I'll ruin this podcast with how much I love to talk about it. But in an environment that you and I create, because of how comfortable we are with this model and how much time we put into studying an adult's experience and that, effectively what we can do now is, on top of our normal measurement styles, on top of what is good about curriculum design, I can ask them one question, the scenario, and test their ability based on one scenario or one question. I can test up to 20 concepts in that scenario. And as we start to debrief them or grade them, quote unquote, we can start to uncover that. And yeah, it may not happen once, which is why I want to have that episode about these 5 core scenarios, but eventually you'll have your aha.
Now, and I love that approach. And so don't give me credit into that you came up with that. I think it's a great approach, because the first time I saw you doing that, just watching the students move through scenarios so smoothly, I'm like, man, you are definitely onto something with this. And just and maybe visit a little bit with it. When we say like 5 core, it's like common things that a patrol officer is going to respond to. But think about if you put that as your central theme, all the things that relate back to it, talking on the radio, where to stand, where to not stand, the questions to ask, gathering information, assessing the law, assessing search and seizure. And, you could have 20, 30, 50 scenarios, but if you just trim all that out, it's going to come back to mostly the basics. We go to theft calls. We go to assault calls. It's not saying we won't go to a sexual assault, but even then, if you have a base of how to handle a call without ninjas coming out of the ceiling tiles to show you that you're you're incompetent or whatever. I hate those type of scenarios. But no, I think when you started introducing that, they get the little dopamine reward for it too, because they just continue to build and do better and better and better. And it's the same too, repetition. Even though we may rerun the same thing, they're still going back and applying radio, gathering information. So it's repetition of a skill or skills instead of trying to reinvent something new every time. I think it's a wonderful approach. And
Yeah.
I would encourage people to steal the process. I mean, if in your own academy, I think you would find it very useful.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, it was born out of our ideas, so I do have to give you credit. And my uncle Bud, his Aha to Ta-Da episode also helped build that and concrete that, because it's reaching the Ta-Da faster if people have listened to that. Because yeah, you're right. The concepts within the location by which we're responding to are different every time. Nothing is quote unquote routine, but it is still a traffic stop. It is still a business. It is still a home that we're responding to. And typically those tactics and things won't change. It's just what we discover inside will. And I can change those as an instructor should I be both competent and comfortable with the process, which to your point earlier, I don't mean to shamelessly walk backwards, but that P word that everybody's afraid of, or maybe we just don't have time for, which is preparation. How much preparation are you putting into your class? That's it. It doesn't solve it, but it does help the fluidity. It lubricates the process in a meaningful way, because now 16 weeks or 18 weeks in the academy, I don't have to set up a scenario. I just tell them, hey, Walmart. They know where that's at. It's a room at our location. Hey, traffic stop. And they're like, Walt, do you want the car parked here? And I'm like, yep, same as last time. And saving it more for the episode. But we're starting to see some really cool things we're starting to see some really cool things come out of it. Some feedback that I'm getting from students on FTO, and where they're kind of like, man, I went to Brookshire's the other day, responded to a threat call, and God, I'm thankful you were a jerk to us and made us do it 1,000 times, because I didn't even need FTO in there. That to me is a success. But if you don't mind, so with this, what came to my mind was patterns. I don't know if I know. I promise you, I'll have a leash. But I think the why behind this episode is it must be on the comfort side of things. There must be something to us as pattern seeking, us as we do what we're comfortable doing. And so I thought really hard about the why. Why do instructors do, in some ways, the negation of what you and I are talking about, the literal negation of what we're talking about? And I want to ask you, because if you can't see us or if you've never seen us before, Mike is much younger and more handsome than I am, but you and I represent two, not generations per se, but two time periods that in some ways are different. But I can still see that people will dress like they were comfortable when they were 18, or they'll use verbiage from the period of time that they're most comfortable. And I think that in closing in on why instructors do this, I want to offer that perhaps it's just a familiarity with patterns. Is that too cryptic?
No, I think when you're doing it a certain way and you get comfortable with that way, then there's no intrinsic incentive to want to try to do something different. And I think I may step on some toes with this, but I think there's a whole lot of us that have been lied to with all the little 5s that people are circling at the end of our class, because we weren't challenging them. And even though we may have made them their eyes bleed from a PowerPoint presentation, they were comfortable with that because that's what they knew they were going to get, and the instructor was comfortable with it because that's how they knew to deliver the material, and also probably how they were trained in the past. And I want to go back to use the word preparation. Well, preparation and comfort generally don't go hand in hand. And I've lost count of the number of times where I've been asked, hey, I got to go teach this topic. And I know you probably have a presentation and a lesson plan. Can I get a copy of that? And I guess I'm too kind-hearted most of the time, if not all the time. I'm probably going to give you a copy. But it also sends a message to me that is like, are you uncomfortable with preparing your own lesson? Are you not confident? Are you not competent? And I think that's more common than certainly the other side of it, which would be, hey, I'm going to spend some time and prepare for this class. I'm going to prepare exercises for the students. I'm going to have some pre-class material that they're going to need to do. I'm going to put some energy and effort into it. And some of that's on your own dime, and that might be another reason. Well, they're going to pay me to teach this class. Why would I want to spend 8, 10, 12 hours a week in preparation when I'm not getting paid for that? And so I think that's a big challenge. And there's so many little variables that relate to just what you probably need to be doing what you need to be doing in the classroom.
Yeah, and that is true. And I tend to hear that request and think, I try not to, but I try not to be judgmental in any way, but I can't help but thinking that's not going to be a good class. I know a lot of the times when I'm asked, it's out of necessity, right? Because, maybe I had to step in, but I just can't help but thinking that's just not going to be a good experience. And maybe I'm just being judgmental, but that's where my mind goes. And part of it too, if you wouldn't mind, could I introduce a little article that I was reading, or a little part that I was reading out of Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit?
Is it nerdy?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Talk nerdy to me.
That's good. We're still on that t-shirt idea. We call it.
Yeah.
We call it. Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. There's a thing, and I have to be honest with you. It's because, if our listeners don't know, I'm neurodivergent. I talk about it to anybody that I can. Specifically, it was one of my superpowers in interrogation, because I recognize patterns really easily. And Charles Duhigg talks about this in his model, The Power of Habit, as I said before. So there's this cue, routine, and reward model that I've sort of applied to instructors in this 5 habit seeking traits. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to read them off. That there's efficiency and energy conservation. There's predictability and safety. There's reward system and dopamine loops. And then the last 2 is identity, behavioral problems. And then there's 5, social and cultural conditioning. Now we can go deeply into it, but what if the biggest challenge in improving police training isn't a lack of tools or evidence, but its instructors are trapped in this habit loop that reward comfort over impact? I mean, that seems to be an instructive, at least in my view, an instructive question.
Well, I don't know that it fits in, like, I've heard the term like a mental schema, where sort of we follow this pattern-based behavior, and to try to break out of that, I don't know what type of influence it would take. And you've explored the article. Is it outside influence? Is it sort of an internal realization that I'm kind of stuck here in this loop that I can't get out of? Mm-hmm. I don't know that people even, I guess it's kind of like recognizing you have a problem is the first step in trying to fix the problem. But if you're not seeing that in yourself, and it's not being pointed out to you by students or other instructors, I think it probably keeps you in that loop. I mean, you and I both probably throughout our career have clicked PowerPoint slides.
Oh yeah.
So when you say that, I'm trying to think back, is like, well, who kicked me in the butt and said, let's not do it that way? And maybe it's just exposure to articles or watching really good people present. I don't know, but I think we both got kicked in the butt and out of that loop.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think habit wins. What I took away from this article is that habit will always win. Normal always wins over what is uncomfortable or even perceived to be uncomfortable. You know, am I going to conserve energy when it's unusual? Right. So I PowerPoints static lectures. If I'm used to that, even if I was critical of it in the past, even if I was, I'm used to it. I survived it. Maybe my whole academy was taught in that way. And although I may have been critical about the process, as soon as I get my instructor license, I'm going to default back to the lowest common denominator, which is habit. And, is it predictable, safe? In other words, safe, something like that.
So you're going to teach the basic instructor next week. And I know because we always push application. And we get head nods going, oh yeah, I think that's the way things should be. We should be more hands-on. I got that the last time I taught it. And yet, what do we consistently see when they get the opportunity to get up there and present? They violate everything that they agreed was a better way to do it and default back to what's comfortable. And even though they weren't instructors, I think that comfort was built around what they were subjected to. Maybe that's a rigid way to say that, but how their academy experience with, or how their experience in different classes has gone. And then moving it to like advanced instructor, we kind of force your hand there. And maybe, back to, if we're going to be hiring some instructors and we're going to force their hand, I mean, I want really good people in front of our recruits and in front of our in-service students. And you kind of have to buy into that model that we're following and I don't want to say abandon it, but step away from the comfort, the norm. And I know it's overused, but get comfortable being uncomfortable for a while. And I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it's kind of where my brain's going with this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's where my brain has gone and is going as well. The truth is my truth is that I will eventually become more comfortable with the uncomfortable because I see the outcome. I know that's a silly way to say it, maybe even dramatic, but once I see cadets starting to produce, or in our CE classes, seasoned police officers start to have those light bulb moments, my being uncomfortable, maybe even tired, maybe even exhausted from preparation, that evens out almost immediately. And that's when instructors, which will be part of, I hope, part of our 5 core scenarios pod episode, is that's when instructors get our dopamine hits. And that's where we start to build as instructors our dopamine loops in a positive way, because then we are rewarded by our behavior. And this was, in my view, the theme of this whole episode, which was you have to try it first, because the 1,000-foot perspective, going back to that comment that I started off the podcast with, was probably a lot to do with my brain doesn't imagine a classroom with all these multiple things happening, because it seems either chaotic and I'm used to control, for instance, or this seems unusual or game or fun time or whatever you want to call it. And that's not my experience. And so you have to try it, because eventually when I see the students walk across the stage, or when I see those good basic instructors come up and grab their certificate and shake your hand, it all evens out in the wash for me. And it rewards that behavior. And it only helps you and I share it with the masses as well, because you and I are collecting real-time data to its effectiveness.
Well, and I think it's a reward you deserve when you invest in the preparation that's required. A lot of instructors are going to be happy. They're going to get a little dopamine hit when they see the 5s circled on the course evaluation. And wonderful instructor, had great stories, played great videos. But I look at that nowadays and go, tell me the truth, or tell me what we could do better, or maybe be more specific. And I get it. At the end of the day, they want to circle their little evaluation forms and leave. But the bigger reward, I think, certainly for me, and I believe probably for you, is the process, putting that process into play, seeing it happen in the classroom. And at the end of the night, the little light bulbs are flashing in their heads. And you're like, I did something here, or I helped them with something here today, or at the end of the week. And that in of itself is a reward. There is nothing at all wrong with feeling good about what you're doing. And again, not a false feeling because somebody's boosted up your ego. It's like you can literally see it happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a huge deal, I think.
Well, can I ask you to, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to cut you off because I have to ask this question. I agree with you, instructors deserve it. And even in the selfless nature by which we teach, because it is a selfless act in my view. What happens when even in, I would say it's a rare occasion, you have that ingratiating crowd, or maybe they're not so grateful. Would you say that I don't know, I don't want to call it fake or faux gratitude. I think that is replaced when you see aha. Would you see the same way? That's the reward you're talking about you deserve, rather than a shake in a great class?
Oh, absolutely. Aha happens a lot for us. And even though it does, it still, every time you see it, you still feel good about it. Because I know maybe like using drugs, you start to develop a tolerance. I've yet to see that in kind of our teaching. It's like, man, that really works. It really works well. And when the students start to tell you, hey, this was way different and it was way great. Yeah, that's a good feeling. But the fact that it works really well is rewarding. But again, got to put the time in, got to put the energy in, got to put the preparation in. Because I don't want a false reward. Don't blow smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know that what we've done and what we're doing is working. It is moving the student's experience forward in a very positive way. That's a super good feeling.
Yeah, and it works for us because I don't know how you build a tolerance up to the most powerful drug out there. And you and I are hypothetically, in your analogy, we have the most powerful drug. I'm bold, I know, but you can't build a tolerance up for something that works so well, in my view. And I don't know if this was, a good time or not, but I can't help but think, maybe even to close this thing out, I don't know, but to say the next time somebody discusses or dismisses a model for an instructor, that's silly. I don't think you should do that. I think the appropriate question is, so then what are you basing your own methods on then? Is it truly comfort? Or is it something that you're just, or I'm sorry, is it comfort or competence? Is it something that you're truly just comfortable with? Because I think that's probably not a good indication that you've prepared well, that you've thought about it. And is it student competence? Is it instructor competence? I don't know, but those things, both a student's ability to take away and low preparation and low instructor effort in our conversation here, they don't live in the same room. They don't live in the same space. It's just a fact that our model brings out the best in student retention. There's no way to parse that out.
No, and I think that it's the outcomes is compare the models and what does it look like at the end with the student? Do they hang on to the information? But even more importantly, can they apply it? I'm not saying that an old school model won't help the student learn the information. It may not help them retain it as quickly. It certainly probably won't help them retain it as quickly. But seeing they can take what they've learned and put it to work, because that's what we do. We use this information in the real world. And when you push back against a different approach, think of maybe in that sort of viewpoint is, are they getting the information locked in? Are they getting there probably faster in learning the information? And can they turn around and apply it? I would argue that there's no comparison between the models.
And you and I can help with that. Literally, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, you know what, Mike, Walt, I'm ready to go less comfortable. Maybe it's not a competence thing. Maybe it's just that I'm ready to try it out. You and I can help with that. We literally have a product ready to go for an academy, and it's easily transferable to to a training coordinator that runs CEs for their own. We can transfer this for them.
No, with existing products are training or just conversations. I mean, we put this podcast out for, I guess, for others who are interested in maybe trying out some of the things that we're finding to be successful. You think about it, it's really, there's no harm, no foul here. The information is still the same. It's just delivered in a little bit different, well, let's say a lot of bit different way. Try it out.
Yeah,
call us up, ask us questions, engage with us on the podcast, come on as a guest on the podcast. I mean, we love to discuss this stuff, and certainly probably not the be all end all of this approach of this topic. We're just passionate about it, and we want to find others who are as well, or maybe folks who can contribute to, building out an even better approach to these training.
Absolutely. Yeah, you stole the words out of my brain. Is that we do want to engage. We're just going to have an all the time ready to go call to action to engage with us, connect, send us emails, whatever it is. I don't even mind. Come and watch us. If you want to attend, if you can't for some reason be a consumer for whatever reason, then at least you can come and watch. Spend an hour with us in our academy, and you'll see it. I truly invite that out. I think that'll become clearer too when we have when Malcolm comes on and talks about it from the TCOL perspective. And I know that you and I have to sequence these episodes so that way we're not giving everything away at once. But certainly there's enough evidence here that it's time to make it a different approach. It's time. It can't be discussed enough. You and I have heard it time and time again from different locations we teach at. Again, we've talked about it before. I can't help but notice whilst walking down the hallways of these classes, I see people melting into their seat with one eye asleep. And that just cannot be an effective strategy for training. It just can't.
No.
And so with this episode, I hope the listeners take away from it. I hope that it's, of course, instructive like everything else. We'll build onto it next with instructor responsibility. Our next episode will be some version of sort of enhancing responsibility, specifically methodology to do it, like teach backs and the science of they know, or are we transferring knowledge to they know in more of the aha to the does space.
Right. Maybe we should too mention, I know we talked about in our update episode some of the venues that we're probably going to be at in 2025, probably leading into 2026. But come to one of our instructor courses, a basic instructor if you don't already have that, or step step out of your comfort zone into an advanced instructor course and let us help you put this sort of approach into play. I know we're mapping out some dates for South Lake, Weatherford, Mansfield, maybe Crowley area. We've taught there before. I think Walt is, you're still sort of discussing about going back to El Paso and then Harris County area. So we're going to be adding that to our calendar, and we'll start to push that out on social media. So when we start having the class flyers and be more specific on the class date. So pretty cost effective. But we just like getting in the classroom and nerding out with a bunch of other people that hopefully want to be nerding out with us. So, but well, I'm going to let you take us home here because we're dragging. Well, we're not dragging this. This is the longest one we've ever done. I was looking up at the clock and saying, man, we're at the hour or over an hour mark now. And I still like talking, but they may not want to hear us much more.
Well, yeah. So July 14, a week of July 14 is our most recent addition in Weatherford. We're grateful to them for adding us. It's going to be a basic instructor. We'll have that registration up on the website and calendar really soon. And then an advanced instructor will follow sometime in August. And as we pull them out, we'll definitely have those classes out. We thank everyone, our listeners, for your support. Future viewers, we appreciate that. And be on the lookout for our new webinar series, our study videos. Those should be coming out pretty soon as well. For everyone, again, please connect with us. And my part.